Okay, guys, we've had a short break from the series of Ask an Archer, mostly because I was able to tick off most of the boxes, but one of the names that was escaping me was Mr. Mike Loads. So we're very happy to have tracked him down. He's now recently moved from the States, from California to Portugal. So he's somewhat on our doorstep here. So Mike, thank you very much for taking the time out to sit with me.
My great pleasure.
Excellent. Mike, you know, you are certainly one of the, what would we say, key figures, elder statesmen in terms of, you know, traditional archery, the whole traditional archery world, a wealth of experience. You are a historical weapons expert as well. So, you know, I doubt we'll kind of get through everything in this one particular interview, but just a couple of things that, you know, we want to kind of touch upon. You had a very interesting Facebook post recently, which I'm sure for some has probably stirred the pot a little bit, but that's a good thing. So I kind of wanted to get straight into it and ask. So the first thing you mentioned in that is why we should refer it horse archery as horse archery and not horseback or mounted archery. Could you maybe just explain that a little bit?
I would love to. So, but first of all, I want to just, you know, you say stirred the pot. Okay. And because the problem is, I mean, I'm all for stirring the pot. It's good if it's done in a polite and absolutely intelligent way.
Sure.
And it, you know, it was musings, it was thoughts, and it was intended to provoke, not provoke, to stimulate.
Stimulate, absolutely.
So that's the intention of it. But what happens is, I mean, it's extraordinary. That post got shared and shared. I mean, it had hundreds and hundreds of shares.
Yeah.
So people who read it didn't know the original context. And the original context is it was on my official page, which is a page about history. So I am writing on that page exclusively from an historical perspective for historians, history buffs, history fans. Now, there's obviously a crossover because I also enjoy horse archery. It's my personal passion and I love it and things. So, but people on horse archery sites think I'm criticizing their sport. No, I'm not. I think their sport's great and I think what they do, they're all wonderful. There's room for everyone, which I made abundantly clear in the post. But I've got people think I'm picking on them. So it stirred the pot in the wrong way from that point of view. So it's very important to understand the context. And that leads me to your question. You see, I can hold a thought. Your question was, why am I so pedantically prickly about the terms we use? And I'm only prickly about it from the historian's point of view. Horse archers can call them, the sport horse archers can call themselves what they like. I don't mind. It's none of my business. But I do feel that historians should try and keep a consistent language and a continuity of language from the past. Now, the biggest distinction is between horse archers and mounted archers. And in medieval England, in the 14th century in particular, but starting in the 13th and into the 15th, there was a type of troop called a mounted archer. And these are in you know, muster lists, etc., and they're recorded, their numbers, etc. They're specifically described as mounted archers, and they were archers who rode to battle but dismounted to fight. They shot as infantry archers. They simply moved on campaign on horses.
Right.
So there is an academic, if you like, distinction between a mounted archer, which is a dragoon type troop, and a horse archer who gallops into battle, shooting from the saddle of his galloping horse. So there is a distinction. So it's important for historians, when they're using language, to know which they're talking about. The horseback archery is more, you know, it's just, I come from, although I've lived in California for 12 years, I come from the UK, and we never used to call it horseback riding. It was called riding or horse riding.
Yeah.
And some Americans do, but it's not really an English term. But that, you know, that's fine. If people
Sure,
call it
sure. No, I totally understand. I mean, that's clarified the terminology, and I do kind of agree with you in terms of, you know, again, one, we need to know the context of these things. We shouldn't take it out of context and jump down someone's throat. And number two, keeping consistency of language is very important. Again, from your point of view as a historian.
Exactly, it depends on what your point of view is, what you're coming at. And so I'm
Right.
writing specifically to an audience of history buffs on my official page.
Right, right.
There's a crossover to the horse archery community,
Yeah.
and then of course it becomes messages down the line, and people take things out of context.
Yeah.
And
I hope nobody sent.
attacks, which I always
Well, I was going to say,
with.
yeah, I hope nobody sent anything too vile back to you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people tell me, oh, I said this, oh God.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what? It's that
So,
I'm very, you know, because
you got thick skin.
TV quite a bit. Yeah, no, I'm terribly sensitive, really.
Oh, yeah.
But I just know,
Yeah.
don't engage with the ad hominem attacks.
No, absolutely.
It's debate with me, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The idea was to promote a debate, because I'm,
Right.
you know, this is not something I ever. You get to that post, which to summarize it, was stimulated by a wonderful article I'd read on academia by a guy called Christopher Hansen from Montana University. And so this is his original theory. And it was building on work done by Lucy Rees, who was a friend of mine, and she actually worked with wild horses in Spain, talking about synchrony in wild horse herds.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Fascinating.
Synchrony is that thing that we see in shoals of fish, flocks of birds, you know, murmuration of starlings, all of that. And you see it, you know, in herds of zebra or wildebeest or wild horses, where they just swarm and flow over the most complicated terrain like a single organism without jostling and bumping into each other. Whereas, you know, you only have to walk down Oxford Street, and it's a challenge. I have a theory of Oxford Street, by the way. Oxford Street is the most difficult street in the world to walk down, because
even though it's straight.
Even though it's straight, it's the most difficult road in the world to walk down, because the whole world is there, and everybody drives on different sides of the road.
Right. And
so we instinctively cross differently. So you always have this little dance of indecision as you're trying to. But generally, horses, you know, don't bump into each other.
Right.
In the wild. And
because there's no rider there.
Well, Christopher Hansen's theory then goes on to say, well, you know, for the Mongols, who were taking their horses from sort of semi-wild herds, as they still do today, you know, on the big Mongol horse marathon, and go, you know, you have to go out and catch your horse and jump on it, and some of them, you know, virtually untrained, and you just ride it out and go. So that horse culture is a semi-wild herd. So his theory is they're using that ability of horses to follow a herd leader in who knows what size of herd pack. I think, you know, somewhere between 6 and 12. It's not going to be bigger than that as a unit with a herd leader. And that really, you know, frees up the horse archers and can help. And I think it's a fascinating theory. And very difficult to prove. So I'm wanting to stimulate conversation about it. But, you know, as a horseman, I also know that, you know, a lot of horses in the West, you're not going to jump on and be able to do that. So, you know, it's the fact that it is a natural behavior in the wild doesn't mean that stable-born and stable-reared and stall-kept horses are going to be able to. You can't just get out there with half a dozen and let go of the reins and everything will be okay, because it won't. You'll never bad at it. So this needs to be done by the half dozen elite top people who are capable of doing this, I'd love to see them experimenting with it more. And one or two are starting to do writing in theirs, etc.
Yeah.
The idea of the poem was to stimulate conversation, saying there's so much about historical horse archers that we don't yet understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I.e., how did they operate on the battlefield?
Yeah.
You know, we know, oh, they hit and run, they ride in and out. But actually, we don't have any more detail than that. It's like, what size of unit can you actually shoot in without shooting each other?
True, but yeah, exactly. That's right.
You know, what's the spacing between the horses? How close do you ride to the enemy before you turn, that sort of thing. But how do the packs operate? Yeah. And then how do the packs interact with the next pack? And think, what happens if you've got 10,000 Mongolian horse archers?
Right. Yeah.
On a field. How
do you manage that?
Operate? I don't really have a clue. So it seemed, how do you manage that? So it seemed to me that, you know, horse archery has been growing around the world phenomenally in the last 10 years or so. And I only wish.
Why do you think that is as well? Just as a side question, why do you think there's been this kind of, revitalization and reviving of all things traditional and archery and horse archery?
Well, I think horse archery sort of eventually came. The trend towards revival really started in the late 60s, early 70s with reenactment groups.
Right.
So it's kind of an extension of that. So the trend for reenactment initially, and it was initially conceived as a method of historical research. And we have instances as far back as the 19th century and before of the odd, wonderful academic, you know, putting some armor on and doing this to see how it felt and see how you could do it and things. So it's not a completely new idea, but reenactment as a movement started really in the very late 60s, early 70s, and gradually built up steam. And it began and remains dominated by domestic history. So, you know, in America, you know, most reenactment is to do with the American Civil War.
Right.
In the UK, most reenactment is either to do with the English Civil War or the Vikings or the medieval period. And, you know, but it grew, and those were the core ones, and then it spread from that and becomes more and more esoteric as it spreads over the decades. And as it spread into Europe and into other parts of the world, then there starts to be more of an international conversation about it. And I mean, and one of the things that I love most about is it's because once you get that archery bug, once you get that historical, traditional archery, different cultures, and it becomes and wonderful. But horse archery.
Sorry, Mike, I'm just going to pause you there for a second. The screen just froze for a minute. I think it was a bit of a lag. Can you just tell me that the thing? Just go back to what you were saying. The thing you love the most.
No way. Oh yeah. Okay. Ready?
I think so. It's still lagging just a little bit. Just give me 1 second here.
I'm getting.
Is it lagging on your side? Could be my my connection. I'm not sure.
Full bar. Any bit. There's a little catch frozen.
All right, just give me a second, because you start talking and then it freezes and then it catches up and all that stuff. So I don't want to want to make sure we get the whole story.
Oh, it's so annoying. It's so frustrating.
It is a little bit. Right, 1 second. And the annoying thing is not much really I can do. I mean, I don't want I don't want to stop the conversation, but I think, right, 1 second.
Good, yeah, I think you're good there.
Okay, all right. Let's just backtrack about 2 minutes if we can. So you're saying the thing you like the love the most.
Oh yeah, okay.
About it, sorry. Yeah, go on.
And one of the things that I love the most about having an interest in historical archery, traditional archery, is it's like somebody gave me the keys to the world. It's like I'm able to travel everywhere and dip into so many different cultures, and I love that. I love traveling, and so what happened, I think, with the reenactment movement was as it spread around the world, a lot of people then started to see reenactment in other countries and start to be interested in different cultures. I mean, it used to be, very esoteric in the UK to have an interest, in thumb ring shooting or composite bows or anything like that. I mean, there were people. Ted McEwen was really. I mean, he's the man who. He is the man who was really my mentor and who turned me onto it in the late 80s and early 90s. And, he was doing horse archery in the UK in the 1980s.
Wow.
But because it's before the internet,
the
young generations don't know. They don't know where it came from. But Ted laid down the foundations and the research, and he was a leading figure in the Society of Archer Antiquaries. And
his name came up a few times before when I spoke with B. Dwyer and a number of others. He was kind of the real pioneer.
Ted was the pioneer. He taught himself Turkish just so he could read Turkish texts.
Amazing.
And he was a wonderful bowyer, who made composite bows. And a wonderful thumb ring shooter, but he put himself, he had lessons to learn to ride and to do that. But it was being done by the odd solitary individual. I first shot a bow off a horse in 1973, I think, when I was studying with John Waller, who's now sadly deceased. But at the time, he was doing a TV series called Black Arrow, and the guy used to ride in shooting his longbow from horseback at the beginning of the sequence. And John was the stunt to do that, and so that's when I first did it. But there was no one else doing it. So in my prime, there weren't clubs, there weren't other people to do it with. You have to have the right space to do that. So I dipped into it over the years when I could, usually for a TV program or something where the situation would be set up that I could do it. But it has only been in the last 10, 15 years that it's exploded.
Yes.
And that, it's a snowball. Once you get a critical mass, then it's really going. And it appeals to horsemen first, who then learn to become archers. Yeah. Because the harder skill is the horsemanship.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just going to share the screen while you're talking, just on one of your YouTube site of a lovely video with you on the horse riding bareback, actually. Probably back in California, I believe. Let me just try and get this up. But while that comes up, your move from, well, tell us about why you initially moved out to California. Was it work related or just personal choice?
No, I married an American.
Aha, okay,
so,
fine.
Why do men do anything? So anyway, but when we were long distance, so we had to make a decision, and she had the sunshine, so I went there, and I was there for 12 years, and I loved it. We're in Northern California,
beautiful place,
north of San Francisco. It's a really beautiful place, a really gentle place with lots of space and great horse country. And I had a wonderful horse community there, and I started the California Centers with Hilary Merrill. And which she's now taking from strength to strength. But I kind of got that scene going there.
Yeah,
And
excellent.
and the Bay Area is a wonderful place for historical archery, because not only was there Hillary and I getting the California Centaurs going, but that you had Justin Marr and GTN with it,
Right.
with all their
Of
pioneering
course.
work on
Yes.
Japanese archery. I bumped into Justin at a regular archery range. So you shooting
Amazing.
thumb rings, aren't you? And
Yeah.
then and you have Tim McMillan there and Maria Peterson, who've got the Redwood Kudo, which is the probably the most authentic Japanese archery dojo in the States. I mean, it's an absolute hub for historical archery.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's how easy was the access
Technology's
to?
beating us, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. How easy was the access to horses and just being able to get on and shoot? I would assume it's somewhat easier than in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So, one of the things that California has that UK doesn't is space. And that's everything, but having horses. So
beautiful.
Going back to the earlier conversation, the Valkyrie that you're showing now, who I had a wonderfully strong connection with. But I subsequently got an Andalusian, Bolero.
Right.
And it's got the lines down the track there, because we'd only just set the club up and Harry was wanting to train. So
sure.
We had kids and things in training.
Yeah.
I don't approve of the lines, really. You shouldn't need them. And that horse didn't need them, but they just were up that way. I filmed it.
Yeah, sure. But it's a beautiful landscape. I mean, so much space there and lovely.
And that was 6 minutes from my house.
Wow, amazing. I remember you did a talk, I think, at the British Museum a couple of years ago, which I was able to attend, and you were showing some of these clips as well, and it just.
You should have come and said hello.
I should have. I think there was a number of other people who were wanting to speak to you, and I had to kind of make a move. But it was a fascinating talk, and I was just so amazed to see that you had a track like this out in the States. And I really thought to myself, I said, I hope I can meet this guy one day, and I would love to, get him over to the UK at some point. So hopefully there's a silver lining with you moving over to Portugal.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, I mean, I still get most of my work out of London because I direct, as well as people know me for appearing on the screen.
Great, yeah.
As a historical weapons specialist, but actually, a lot of my bread and butter work is directing history docs and things, and that most of the work is still out of London. Most of it's in Europe. I do a lot for German TV, for instance, and so that's one of the reasons for the move.
Excellent.
And I kind of wanted to come back to Europe, but I wanted to keep the California weather. So
yeah. No, Portugal is, I think it's a happy medium between both, but I definitely think that it will be a benefit to us here over in Europe. And I mean, I for one, we were meant to actually have a course with Lucas early July. He was meant to come over, do a clinic, but obviously flights got cancelled and whatnot. He came last year. We had a great clinic. The year before, we had Mihai Cosme come over. So, we try to keep. And
Lucas is terrific, and Lucas is such a good teacher as well.
He is, absolutely.
It's we've had clinics with Lucas. Lucas is a good friend, and I've done a lot of things with Lucas, and he knows what he's talking about, and he's really good. Yeah,
he's excellent. Yeah. So I'm just going to show people this is Mike's YouTube channel. Mike's LOADES channel, some very interesting videos on there. He's got a nice long video on archery, its history and forms, and some other things about different weapons. I'm sure people have probably logged on to his Facebook page. This is the article he wrote recently about naming horse archery and the whole idea of synchronization and things like that. On that point again, Mike, I'm sure you might have come across Ali Gurjahan from Iran.
Yeah, I met him. He's a lovely man.
You have, yeah. So he, I think, you know, and this is not to you know, not down talking anyone else, but I think Ali is probably one of the more authentic horse archers. Why? Because he's actually training the horses out in the mountains, and there are no tracks, there are no lines, etc. He's literally just going out there and learning the nature of the land.
They did, and when you see his videos, when they have a young horse, when they have a foal,
yes,
you'll see it's out there following along in the training.
Right.
So that's actually very supportive to this, you know, theory that I was putting out there.
Yeah.
That, you know, and the essence of this theory is it wasn't trying to denigrate modern sport archery at all, but it was saying in modern sport archery, it's all about the individual and scoring points.
Right.
That's what the sport is.
Yeah,
that's fine that that's what the sport is.
Mm.
But what I'm saying is, as an historian, don't forget that's not the role of the horse archer in historical periods. Horse archers historically didn't work competitively; they worked cooperatively. And that's a huge distinction.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of it as a martial art,
absolutely.
If you want to think about horse archery as a martial art, which is one of several legitimate, you can think of it as a martial art, you can think of it as a performance art, you can think of it as a competitive sport, you can think of it as a personal recreation. All of these things are valid. But if you want to think about it as a martial art and think about it in its historical context, then in that context, they rode cooperatively in groups. We don't really know what size those groups are or what the optimum size of those groups are.
No.
And it would be great to start shedding light on that. You know, the going back to the idea of reenactment as a mode of historical research. You know, there is so much we know about armor now, about the wearing of armor, and because people started getting better and better and better reproduction armor made. And now we understand it in a way that people didn't understand it 50 years ago. And I think there is yet understandings to have about historical archery that we haven't quite grasped yet. So I just wanted to put it out there. This is not for everyone. This is for really, really, really top-end people with unique access to facilities and groups of horses.
Right.
They might like to start working with pairs, working hopefully within a couple of years, 3 or 4 years, working up to a troop of 4 or 5 people, working cooperatively, moving freely over a landscape. What can be done? I don't know. And that was the purpose of the post, was to say, have a think about this.
Absolutely.
Because there is something about the horse being a herd animal. And that's something in its DNA that we, you know, with certain training methods yet to be decided, we may be able to channel that. But it's certainly not saying jump on any random bunch of horses and it'll all be fine. Not in that at all.
No, it takes a lot of specific training and things like that. And I think that's one of the things that Ali is doing. He's training the horses specifically for horseback archery. And a lot of the people I've interviewed.
So when you see him out in the mountains there, and he's doing it, but the young foal is following along.
Yes.
It's showing you that's where the training starts. And you could kind of, you know, build that up and perhaps have several foals. And so you actually create little micro herds.
Yes.
That can operate as units maybe. And I think it's the beginning of investigation that the next generation may carry.
Sure, absolutely. Again, here just some books that Mike has done. Obviously, in terms of the archery context, War Bows is the famous one.
Very good value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got the Amazon link here. It's under 30 quid, which is a steal. So one question about
It's a
the,
big crossbow.
well, it says there, what does it say here? Yeah, about 24 quid, something like that, which is good.
Yeah, 25
So
quid, 24 quid, yeah.
in the book, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of categorize all war bows into about 4 categories. So you've got you know, the longbow, crossbow, the composite, and the Yumi. And is this how you? Yeah, I mean, would you categorize?
Yes.
All war bows under the, obviously the composite bow. We have like the, you know, the Turkish and the
Yes.
Hungarian.
So you want me to qualify
Maybe just explain. Yeah, I mean how that categorization works.
all war bows into those 4. Yeah. So it's like, how do you come up with a title for a book? So it's like these are the things I wanted to write about, and what's a good title that fits on a page without being an essay. So obviously, you know, I could say an apple and an orange and a banana and a peach are all fruits, but I couldn't say that's all fruits.
Right. Absolutely. Got you.
So,
yeah.
So what I'm saying is all the bows in this book are discussed in their context as military bows.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say there aren't other bows.
Okay.
Nor does someone just coining a collective term to try and describe the things within.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a saying context, like this is about military bows.
Yes.
War bows. There's a shorter word that fits easier on the cover. You can have it in bigger writing, and it is the context. This is how they're being discussed, and you know, I like the fact that crossbows is in there because I think they get a bad press, and from an historian's point of view, that's not right. They
everything
were
everything
the
has to be
mainstream
included.
weapon for a considerable period of time. Yeah, it does, and it's a really the crossbow's really interesting, you know, historically.
Absolutely, yeah. When I interviewed I interviewed Stephen Selby, and he actually showed me an old Chinese mechanism for a crossbow, which was fascinating, and you know, it showed that the Chinese used crossbow very effectively in some of their wars as well.
Oh, very, very much so. No, and there's quite a bit about Chinese crossbows in the book, and I've done, and you know, I have even shot replica Chinese crossbows from the Great War, which was quite
excellent,
fun.
Amazing. Mike, did the English, was the English longbow ever shot off a horse in battle?
Yes. No. You'd like me to elaborate, probably.
Please.
So we absolutely have plenty of pictorial evidence of the longbow being shot from a horse, predominantly in a hunting context.
Yes.
Now, one of the things you'll notice if you go out riding in countryside is how close you can get to wildlife. Your silhouette on a horse is very different to that of a human silhouette walking, and B, the smell of the horse probably overpowers your own smell, unless you've just been traveling on the London Underground. But it's, you know, I found in California, you get really close to deer and things. They're not spooked by a man on a horse in the same way that they would be by somebody on foot.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're not necessarily hunting with longbows at the gallop, although there are a couple of images of that. There are images of that, including female. But I think a lot of it would be at stand. So you're on a horse at stand. as a way of hunting.
Right.
Now, there are one or two images of longbows being used in a military context. One famous one is a 15th century representation of the crossing of the Somme at Blanchetaque just before the Battle of Crécy in 1346. And that's when Edward III's army had to cross the river in order to get to, where they were going to fight, and they had resistance from a contingent of the French and crossbowmen, and they charged across the river and drove the crossbowmen away. There is one illustration showing somebody, muddling up history and having historical fantasies is not the sole preserve of Hollywood. It's been going on since Homer. So, all cultures have used a mythical past and an idealized golden age that never existed in which to set their storytelling. And so a 15th century illuminated manuscript talking about a battle that happened 100 years earlier, read possibly in a chronicle that they had mounted archers, which that army did. That army in particular, I think it was 12,000 mounted archers off the top of my head were in Edward III's Crécy campaign army, 12,000 mounted archers. So maybe 100 years later, the monk in France who was making that drawing and knew they'd crossed this river, maybe he misinterpreted because he hadn't read my Facebook posts.
Right.
He possibly misinterpreted the term mounted archer and put it in there. So we have to be very careful and not always believe our eyes when it comes to the visuals. But generally, no. Was it ever done? Maybe. But generally, no. Generally, the longbow was used for hunting on horseback. Yes, we see that in Le Rameau, which is a 15th century treatise on hunting. There's mention of this music. So it's definitely a hunting weapon on horseback. And there's no problem. There is no problem in using a longbow from horseback. In the longbow section of my Warbows book, you'll see a picture of me on a horse shooting a longbow.
Many people think it will get in the way or hit the horse or whatever, but I guess you just have to be.
I know they do.
Good enough to use it.
Well, first of all, we need to apply some physics, and the physics are: if you're on a horse, you're actually taller than you are standing on the ground. Right. So actually, technically, you could have a longer bow.
Right.
You could actually have a bow 3 times the length of the longest bow.
Yeah.
Where a shorter bow and the Japanese bow, the Yumi, is asymmetric.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But the bottom limb from the hand grip to the bottom lock is only within an inch or so of the bottom half of a longbow from the hand grip. Right. It's just the top half is extra long.
Yes.
But from the hand grip to the bottom knock, obviously longbows also vary in size, but then people vary a little bit in height. The Manchu bow, Qing dynasty bows.
Yeah.
Huge bows,
very long,
massive bows.
Very big, big
and the bottom limb of that is absolutely equivalent to the bottom limb of a longbow. And you can, the issue is, of course, as I said, you could shoot a 10-foot bow because you're higher on a horse,
right?
If you're only applying physics. But where it's necessary to have it, or where it's an advantage to have a shorter bow, is that ability to shoot
both sides
on the other side of the horse's neck to turn and do all that. So there is an agility with shorter bows, but the Qing dynasty archers, horse archers, were among the best ever, and they're doing it right up, in the 1800s. They're still using it on the battlefield. So it's really silly to say you couldn't use a longbow. It's really silly to say, it has to be a short bow. But
Yeah.
there are advantages to a shorter bow.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the kind of war games or war tactics that we did a couple of times when I had my earlier days of horse archery. We would compete out in Korea, and one of the games they would do is called Mogu. And yes. I mean, I think that's a fantastic, very realistic game, because again, there's no tracks, there's no set track. It's just two horsemen, horsewomen, horse people, whatever. And you've got to follow this ball, and this ball is bouncing around erratically, left, right, up, down. And I mean, that I think is a much more realistic representation of true horse archery, would you say?
Yes, I would. Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely, because you've got the target's moving. It's not just you moving, but the target's moving. Which it's mostly, however, a training for hunting rather than for the battlefield.
Yes, right.
And it really derives from the earlier practice that happened or certainly happened in Japan. I imagine in Korea, which is shooting dogs. In Yomono, I called it. So they had this archery spectacle, for lack of a better word, in which people would come in and shoot blunt arrows with paint on the end, so you could see the mark at these poor dogs. But in fact, when General Grant, actually with ex-President Grant, and I think it was just after he'd been president. So the US President Grant,
right,
Ulysses Grant, went kind of on a world tour after he left the presidency, and he went to Japan, and he went to one of these things, and on that occasion they substituted the dog for a Mogu type.
Ah, okay, right, I see.
It's in Warbow's book, the Japanese section. People, there's a big chunk, and I think it's the biggest dissertation in English on Japanese archery at the end of Warbow's book. And everybody talks about the longbow bit and the composite bow bit. The crossbow bit and the Japanese bit are equally interesting. But yes, Mogu is definitely something, and also with the two riders, we start to get into this idea of cooperative riding.
That's right, working together.
I literally just started writing a book last week. My next book, which is How Horses Shaped America, and I'm on Mustangs. And I was just going through the photo libraries, and I just pulled out a really cool image of Comanches hunting buffalo.
Wow.
With bows and arrows, and there's kind of one here, and he's kind of over his horse with his leg up, shooting over the back. Right. Wonderful. Amazing. But the other one's open, and it looked like two Mogu riders.
Yeah. Right.
Flanking and
directing the bison.
It brought it to mind. It was like, oh God, that's a George Catlin painting of 19th century Comanches hunting buffalo.
Yeah.
And if you squint, you could be looking at an image of people shooting Mogu. And I really liked that synergy.
Amazing.
But yeah,
excellent. So you mentioned your current new book that you're working on. What other kind of projects are you kind of busy with at the moment that you can tell us about?
Well, there are things I can't tell you. But I have a book coming out in October called Dogs,
Excellent.
Working Origins and Traditional Tasks. And I'm sad to say, now there is an archery angle in there.
Ah, okay, good.
Do I reveal it, or do I make everybody buy the book to find out what it is? Funnily enough, it has got an archery angle in there. I'll tell you, I had various first-hand experiences with a lot of different dogs.
Yeah.
I hasten to add that because I know this is an archery show, and there is going to be an archery point.
That's yeah, got no worries.
I, our dogs are in crisis. We have a real issue with health problems with dogs and the inbreeding and etc. But the answer, I don't think the answer is just ban all pedigree dogs and just get dogs from the pound, because then we'll lose that precious treasure of those heritage breeds. I don't want to live in a world with no Labradors and no Spaniels.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I don't want to live in a world where dogs are suffering because of their breeding, like bulldogs and
yeah.
So that's behind it. So it's like, well, where did dogs come from? Well, they came because we use them. The different shapes they are. They all come from the wolf, which is the front picture. We use them for different purposes. Now, a lot of those purposes were hunting. And my caveat is, although I went and had, I went dog sledding in Alaska and out with Salukis on camels in the desert.
Amazing.
But I didn't hunt anything for the book because I just didn't want modern morality debates to distract from the dog's story.
Yeah, I think that's a very smart move.
I'm not saying so no animals were hurt in the making of this book.
Yeah.
But there was one with the poodle, which was originally a duck hunting dog. So they were water dogs and duck hunting dogs, and they have web. The standard poodle has webbed feet. And John Keyes, who wrote the first book in English on dogs in 1589, I think, talks about these water dogs retrieving the hunter's crossbow bolts when he missed.
Wow.
And there are pictures of dogs with bolts in there. So I made up crossbow bolts, because that's what you would use to hunt ducks with, because you don't use sharps because it damages the meat for the table, and sharps sink and you're hunting ducks over water, whereas these blunts would float. And every archer knows ammunition, archery ammunition is very, very expensive, very labor intensive. So it was great. So I was out in Georgia, America, where they breed these hunting poodles, which they still hunt with.
Amazing.
And I was there shooting a crossbow on a lake and sending the dog out to retrieve my bolt. And obviously it's like retrieving a stick, but that was an evocation of an old archery thing that I don't think anyone's done for 500 years.
Amazing.
And I did just slightly break my rule. I did have the poodle retrieve a duck, because it was irresistible to have a poodle with a duck in its mouth swimming ashore. But the duck came from the freezer. I didn't shoot it.
Okay.
It was out of hunting season.
We'll make sure we put that in there.
A little bit of archery, but it's a book about dogs.
Excellent, excellent.
And I'm writing another book, and I have various secret projects in development, but waiting for obviously the pandemic to end before I can go filming.
Yeah. Well, we certainly look forward to some of that coming out, and do let us know when those things come out. Again, everyone's waiting for the pandemic to die down, but I think I'd like to be the first one to kind of put my hat in the ring and say, look, we would definitely like to invite you over to the UK to do some type of clinic on anything that you find would be interesting, whether it's horse archery or a talk or whatever. I would be very happy to have you over.
Sure. I'm now only 2 hours away, so it's once the pandemic's over, I plan to be a frequent visitor.
Excellent.
Because that's still where I'm already missing my California friends terribly, but
I'm sure.
I've been missing my UK friends for over 12 years, and I'm really
Where are you originally from in the UK?
I'm originally from King's Lynn in Norfolk.
Okay.
Little spot on the East Coast, but I lived most of my adult life in London. Most of my friends were in London. I think of it as home, although I did live in Scotland. I lived in Scotland for 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
I lived in Kent and lived in Berkshire, and I've been
different places. All right, Mike. So what I usually do, just to kind of wrap up each interview, I do kind of a quick fire, just a couple of quick, interesting questions. So, laminate or composite bow, which one do you prefer to shoot?
I prefer a composite bow because I like
Obviously,
it.
being a historian.
Yeah, well, being, you know, so I like that. You know, I mean, I've got a number of Lucas Novotny bows, which I treasure, and it, you know, they're temperamental, you know, it's an extra challenge. But having said that, day to day I do shoot laminate bows mostly. You know.
They each have their pros and cons, I guess.
They each have their pros and cons, you know, and the maintenance of a composite. I'm limited. I just stringing a quite powerful Turkish bow one day a few years ago. It turned inside out on me. You know how they
twisted out, right?
I broke my scaphoid.
Wow, really?
Here.
Okay.
Yeah. And they said, oh, you know, you've got to get it repaired because you're going to lose the use of that hand.
Oh my God.
I know, it was quite serious. And then they said, well, the way to get it repaired is you have to take a bone graft from your hip and put it in there. And at your age, there's only 50% chance of recovery. And you can't ride for a year. I said, no, thank you. I'll take my chances. But I mean, I don't want to push my luck, but that's sort of 5 years ago now. And every so often I have it x-rayed. And they say I'm a medical miracle because it's kind of, although the gap is there, it's held alignment. But it means I now really can only have to shoot under 40 pounds.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with that. Yeah, cool.
Careful with that.
Yeah.
It just mechanically, it won't take the strain of anymore, and I don't want to push it because I'd
no, it's not worth.
To hang on to the use of that.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. It's not worth the risk. Okay, wooden or carbon arrows? What do you prefer? Bamboo. Okay. All right.
Grass. Just to be pedantic.
Yeah.
I do prefer bamboo arrows. Having said that, for daily practice, I use carbon.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is that I developed with custom thumb rings an insert knock. So I don't know if you're familiar with custom thumb ring, and in fact they put a couple of thumb ring designs into production at my suggestion.
Okay.
And I suggested to them to develop a knock, an historical knock, because we're all the horse knocks of their standard arrows.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is no good. And I was looking at historical arrows, and you know, whether it's Mughal or Turkish, whatever, and they have they're bulbous, which gives you a very different finger feel, which is key for speed knocking.
Yes.
And all the reproduction. I mean, the Vermeil ones are terrific.
Yes, they're good.
And there's been various attempts at getting pre-flared knocks, and they're very good. The top knock, the offset one, but no one was going on the historical model. I thought, why? And so I had lots of to and fro with James at Custom Thumb Rings, and I sent him some of my original Mughal arrows I recently sold, but I had them at the time, and saying, you know, this is what historical arrows are like. We need to build on that. And there were all sorts of technical problems in 3D printing, you know, in getting the plastic to do that it wouldn't snap off. But he's now developed one, which he does credit me with kindly on the site, which is it's just brilliant. It's transformative, but it only comes as an insert knot. We've talked about making it as a fit over for bamboo, but of course bamboo is not that consistent. There's a problem, but the dream one day we'll be able to have an historical knot that can plug into a bamboo shaft. Yeah, we pioneered these knocks, which, you know, for horse archery, I think they're just perfect, and they're, you know, they're not exactly historically right, but they're historically influenced. And they do have a different finger feel, and you do have greater security on a galloping horse, holding them and things, and they are quicker to get on the string, and they're great. And the lesson of that is that if we want to learn something, if we're puzzling about something, go back to the historical model. The answer is there. We just have to look for it.
Right. That's it.
And that's why I think I don't, you know, I'm not the history police. I'm not suggesting a test of historical purity for everybody in what they do. Do what you like. It's just fine. I'm really easy with whatever anybody does. I only quibble with when people get it confused. You know, I think compound bows are great with their wheels and pulleys. I love technology. Everybody think, oh, he's interested in history. He must really want to be ye olde. No, I love technology. I'm a modern person. History to me is just an extension of my life. And doing things like archery and riding and doing them together, as in horse archery, they just broaden my experience of you know, how do I know? I'm 70 this year. I don't know how I'm going to live, but it's like it gives me so many more decades of life. That I through traveling through history on a daily basis. And having historical experiences.
Absolutely, it's certainly very rich. I was just looking up the custom thumb rings site. Just tell me, is it one of these? Is it the Mughal, which looks a bit bulbous? Is it one of these? There's the Ottoman Turkish one, which looks a bit.
Yeah. The Mughal. I think it's the Mughal is the one. Which
looks actually quite round. Then you've got the Manchu, obviously, which is fairly straight.
No, it's the Mughal. It's the
Mughal one.
It's the Mughal.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I haven't actually seen it so bulbous.
Yeah, but it's got a number of things, but you've also got the relatively short slit. If you see, see what I mean. You'd be amazed how that gets on the string. But as the right up there, you know, one of the things we had to change is that modern strings with modern fibers are much thinner than the thicker strings that the Mughals used, for instance.
Yes.
You know, so you have to adjust your materials accordingly.
Interesting. I think it would be. I should get in touch with. Who did you say was the owner of Custom Thumb Rings? What was his name?
James.
Yeah, I think I need to.
Okay, yeah, I'll send you an email link to him.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
he's a wealth. He is a wealth of knowledge.
Definitely.
And you know, especially about thumb rings.
Yeah, absolutely.
He really is. And they're doing stuff there.
Good.
Right. And with a longbow, I would only shoot wooden arrows. So going back to your question,
yes.
I prefer. I aesthetically, I enjoy bamboo arrows the best.
Yeah.
I mostly shoot carbon arrows because I can put those insert nocks in.
Yeah.
But if I'm shooting my longbow, then I would only shoot a wooden arrow.
Of course. Yeah. Your favorite type of bow to shoot? What kind of model do you know? Is it, you know, Manchu? Is it Turkish? Is it whatever?
Yeah, I do like short and punchy. So I can't imagine why. I like the Turkish bows. I do like Turkish bows. And I mean, I've got a little Laminate alley bow, Turkish bow that I just love to shoot. You know, but I also love the Mariner Ming 4. That's an absolute go-to favorite of mine. But you know, my absolute favorite is my Lucas Novotny Turkish.
It's hard to beat Lucas's bows. They're really well made. Okay, last question, Mike. Again, this is just a bit of a fun theoretical question. If you were able to travel back in time to a different period of archery or horse archery, what era would that be, or what era interests you the most? Did that come through?
Oh, I think it would be. It would be. Are we all right on sound?
Yeah, we're good.
You went slow motion.
Bit of lag, but we're there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I hate these traveling back in time questions. This whole point of being modern is that we can have it all. We see, we can do it. Well, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, just think of the modern horse archery scene. One of the problems we have, the Japanese have got it absolutely right because they do it within their cultural tradition and they don't do anything else. Whereas, what do we do with the modern horse archery scene? It's not culturally specific. Are we being Huns? Are we being Mongols? Are we being Ottomans? Are we being this?
We're all a bit confused, aren't we?
Mix it up a bit. Yeah, but I think for me, aesthetically, and that's the thing that drives all of this, far more than historical interest, far more than sporting activity. The thing that drives me the most is aesthetics. It's like, I want to look like Justin Marr when I shoot a bow. I never will, but it's just poetry to see it done that beautifully and that well. I want to ride like Hilary Merrill. I want to that to me, it's like when everything is in harmony, when everything is done right, there is a beauty. For years I taught historical sword fighting, and it was the aesthetics, the shapes, the biomechanics. That's what inspired me and drove me in evoking those imageries. So which period of archery does that the most for me? I think it is probably the tradition of Ottoman archery. I think it went to a very high level, at the Ottoman courts. Obviously, both the ground archery, is the wrong word, positions, and the horse archery, and being able to do the kabak. Like the gentleman in the image behind your head, that glorious back image where he is absolutely horizontal alongside the horse's neck, shooting vertically up the pole.
Amazing.
Not shooting at an angle towards it, but he's underneath the pole shooting up. And of course, you're familiar with the story of the Viceroy of Tripoli who was doing that and not paying attention, and his horse ran into the pole, and both horse and he were killed. They're doing me indeed. But again, they were doing it as display. Whether they were scoring points, we don't know. We don't know how much competition was in there. These things were done for martial display as a martial art. It was performance art, battlefield discipline. And we know a lot about the performance art. There's accounts, of travelers went here and they saw this. We know a lot about the training, from the Qing dynasty or the Mamluks, or people explain training tracks and training. You've got to ride this and do that to train.
Yeah.
But there isn't this mention of competition in the way that we do it today. And so just to close that loop, I do think we need to open our minds more to, for those who want to. Some aspects of horse archery can be more of a cooperative group endeavor rather than individual competing for points.
Absolutely. No, you're certainly right. That
was a much longer answer than you wanted.
That was good. No, it was the answer that you wanted to give. That's fine. But no, I think you certainly have a point there, and like with many things, there's more things we don't know than we do know, and we have a tendency to kind of fill in the gaps and make things up a little bit. But I think we're just doing the best we can with what we have, and important people like yourself.
It's all we can do. It's all we can do. I put. You mentioned that on my YouTube channel there's a video that I made back in the early 90s. Archery, its history and forms. And I've now made it available free on my YouTube channel. And I say as a caveat in there, I don't necessarily agree with some of the statements I made in that film 25, 30 years ago. And somebody posted on my page saying, well, isn't that wonderful? What a great thing that we change our minds and prepared to change and go. And I thought, yeah, that's right. I was doing it as a kind of humble apology. Sorry, I think I got it wrong back there.
Yeah.
And they're saying, oh, that's great. The 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Through the work of people like Joe Gibbs shooting heavy bows and things like that, we know more than we did 30 years ago. I didn't know it was possible for a human being to shoot a 200-pound bow.
Yeah.
Seemed incredible.
Absolutely.
Now we know it can be done.
Yeah. Well, you know, on behalf of the archery community, we appreciate all the work you've put in, Mike, your extensive knowledge and experience, and we certainly hope to benefit from you in the near future once the whole COVID thing settles down. We hope you settle into Portugal quickly and all of your stuff reaches you safely.
Especially the bows. As long as the bows get...
Everything else can sync. I just need the bows.
Yeah, there are a few books.
But this certainly won't be the last meeting. Hopefully, it's the first of many. We'll stay in touch with you, and we certainly will get you over to the UK at some point and do something or other with you and benefit from you. So thank you once again for your time.
Well, thank you so much, and I really look forward to meeting you in person.
Excellent. Likewise. Thank you so much. You have a good day. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.